first of all, in the MOD, we announced that we had somebody internally who really carried the love story of the single market. The last study we did, the single market study, which was Vincenzo. It was known by people went there to get it signed by Vincenzo. So we're still, laughing a bit about that. That's. I also have some excellent people who has made a huge difference on this one, which is Marta and Jan, who has basically carried this through, of course, with our members. I don't know if you are here. Where are you? They're in the back. Can we just give Jan and Marta a big hand before we start? It is actually quite excellent. The methodology is good. It has concrete findings and concrete recommendation based on facts. There is a lot of discussions around it we can have, and we'll have that later in the panel. But let me take you through a few of the conclusions. So here we have the 8 of the 10 critical technologies that was mentioned in the Commission's European economic security strategy. We chose the 8 of them because that's what we could cover with our membership. And we looked into what is the European position. I mean, you should be blind if you don't see that Europe is behind on technologies. Doesn't mean that we don't have good things. It just means that we are behind. That's a fact. So let's start by looking at the overview of this. So we are leading in one technology. Hi, Anne. We are leading in one technology, which is connectivity. Okay, so this is just the overview. I'll tell you what the more detailed findings are in a second. We are leading in one of the 8. Then we are like in game, but I would say not strong on the middle ones. So additive manufacturing, energy tech, biotech, quantum, and space tech. And then, unfortunately, on AI and semiconductors, it looks not that good. Actually, it looks quite bad. And thank you also for your suggestions yesterday on how we should actually address this problem internally in Digital Europe. And I'm sure that my staff will get in touch with to hear more about your ideas. So let's take a few examples. I can't go through all the technologies, but you'll find the findings in the report. So this is not only on connectivity, is not only a jolly story, right? I mean, the truth is we have the world's best technology, period. Toot, right? So that's the celebration. Now, if we look at the markets and the profits, they are shifting to being outside and have for a while been outside Europe because there is a lack of adoption here, a lack of investment and a lack of adoption. And if I'm not wrong, I did hear something about mergers being allowed for the telecom operators, but if we look at the market, we lowered the prices for consumers and we said, you guys, 110 telecom operators in Europe, you cannot merge. I mean, page 1, right? It's like low prices, no mergers, no scale of productions, blah, right? So we do have like a gap there to catch up with. Then you have a lack of consolidation and investment, and what we call the infrastructure accelerator effect, right? You make a bridge, all of a sudden people can trade it because you have that with infrastructure also. As you don't have investment, you don't also have the uptake of, for example, businesses of 5G or 6G. So that is definitely, it's a good story, but it's not a lasting story if it continues like this. So huge investments and bold moves on infrastructure and on digital connectivity needs to be done to keep this leadership position. Then if we look on AI, we have, that's the other side. So we go from this end to this one, right? So here we have a lot of small companies, but we all know digital needs scale. If you don't scale and you don't scale fast, you won't be there for long. And we have a lot of small companies, very few big ones, and the EU companies are typically, but they are. The good story is that they are actually creating quite a lot of value, companies on top of existing companies' AI models. And but we do have an extremely weak position in the early parts of the supply chain, but we are still present in the B2B. But AI is not a good story. It's, I think we have around 6% of the venture capital that goes to startups and scale-ups, 6% of the world's venture capital, and we have 1/6. So just the numbers are the same, but it's not the same number. We have 1/6 of the investment in AI that US has. So quite a big investment gap. Then let's look at quantum. Well, in quantum, we're really strong in R&D. But to my knowledge, it's typically in R&D that are not company-based, but university research institutes. But that's, as I always say, that's a good thing, but it's the spending. So normally what we should do is like, we spend money to earn money. Right now we spend money, period, right? Which normally is a very bad idea if you want to get rich sometime on this, right? Meaning that we are also not creating private sector jobs. We had the winner of the Unicorn Award this year, yes, in February, was Multiverse from Spain. It's one of the few quantum companies, very late supply chain, so late in the supply chain, not early in the supply chain. So how do we get more of that, and how do we get the scale? There are some interesting things going on. Novo Nordisk just put loads of money in working with the Niels Bohr Institute. Super interesting, collaborations between private, and not public sector and private, but private sector with the public. And I think we need much more of that. And when we look at quantum, number of publications, here you see China is running ahead. EU is, just there with the US. But you can look at the fish. What happens to small fish? Yeah, small fish get eaten by bigger fish, right? That's how it is. So we cannot only have small fish, we need to have big fish, fishes. Yeah, if we want to survive. Anyway, going to energy tech. Oh, yeah, the headline is fantastic, right? It's complicated. And I'm sure that Anne can tell us much more about that in a second. So what we hear is, we used to lead. We used to be the masters of green technologies and wind and solar, etc. We are quite strong still on digital and wind, although that components in these industries are increasingly coming from elsewhere outside Europe, which is exactly what happened to solar, and all of a sudden solar was gone. Solar is history. I'm being a bit like bold here, okay? But it's not solar is not in a good position. And we have a huge investment shift even by European companies to invest in R&D and in marketing of products to either China or the US. Now we have to see if we have export controls, etc. But let's hope that we have more investment and more innovation first. How to fix it? Two of the big things that are drawing us back is the permit structure. It can take like 8-10 years to build a windmill. You want to build a factory. It takes you like 8 years to. What happened in Germany? Was it something like removing black ground, and would take like another 15 years before we can dig a hole in the ground? So and then of course procurement criterias, typically in Europe, price. If you only go by price in the end, I mean, there are other places where you can find funding much easier than in Europe, and then you can afford to buy your way in with lower prices, and voila, what do you get? You get what you asked for. So I would say in the digital, I mean, some of our members are champions still in green technologies. We still have a lot of good R&D, but the story is not going to last if we continue in the direction that we have just seen here. Then additive manufacturing. Just to say, this is not like advanced manufacturing, and one of the things I think we should challenge is that when they look at critical technologies, depending on what they are planning to do, right? So when we look at manufacturing, we cannot only look at 3D printing. We also need to look at other technologies like digital twins, artificial intelligence for optimization of X, Y, Z. So there are many other products where we might be leading, but here it is. That's the scope of the commission. It's the 3D printing. And we used to be a world leader there. There's a huge consolidation. Like in all tech companies, huge consolidation phases are taking place as we speak. More investment and innovation in US and China. You see them here. And we believe that the focus should be wider if we're talking investment, not restrictions. Okay, anyway, so just some of them. You will find also the rest of the 8 technologies in the study. As you see here, you have space technologies, quite high, but again, it's a little bit like quantum. A lot of public sector funding, good research and development, very little return on investment, very little private sector and scalable companies. On biotech, it's a bit the same. We used to be really world leading, but what happened like 10, 15 years ago is that we started restricting things on data. We started not collaborating amongst companies on, for example, creating data spaces. So we lack that, collaboration in private sector, and public sector started to restrict, any kind of use of data, and therefore we saw a big shift of biotech companies moving to the US, both for being the research and development and having access to innovate, but also basically for marketing of their products because they could go faster to market. So the conclusion are we spent our money not necessarily in the wrong way, but we forget about why we spent the money. We spent public money to get money back, right? And somehow that doesn't materialize into companies, and we have discussed why. So, instead of being like all depressed and saying we cannot do anything about it, this is the how. If you look at the economic security strategy, this is all about export controls, investment screening, trade, what we call trade restrictive measures. They might be needed, but they're definitely not going to boost investment, right? It's not what will happen because we are in global supply chains is disruptions. So what we say is like here, why don't we shift it? For once, why don't we not bold? Why don't we believe that we have a private sector that can actually do the job? Remove barriers of internal market, look at partnering, strategic partnerships and competitiveness as the tools for solving the crisis that we are in on critical technologies. So what we did was ask these companies, what works for you? What will make you a success? And here's what came out. They said, of course, restrictive measures, they're not necessarily going to help us. We are in international supply chains. We will be somehow disrupted, paralyzed for periods maybe, no new investments. Maybe they are needed to do certain things, but they're not going to help us to earn more money and grow. Second one here, over there, they said, harmonized regulation, education and skills. The one you see coming out as the strongest one is funding and common European tax incentives. Money in pockets to do business, right? And then pan-European procurement, instead of like buying stuff in small pockets of Denmark and Sweden and Germany, why not make big programs of scale for procurement? And of course, not only with price tags, price as a criteria. And then what we call private-public, not public-private, but private-public partnerships, led by private sector, where the private sector has the leadership of, for example, you can have, as I mentioned before, the Novo Nordisk and Niels Bohr, where it's a collaboration for really developing, cutting-edge new technologies that is worth something for companies that they can basically base their research on whatever on. So, and will benefit the society as a whole. So that's what we call the high, and then of course large-scale infrastructure investment. That's what we call the high impact. That's what they told us. They said, you want us to succeed? Less of this, more of that. Of course, we know that the Commission works in silos. Now we're going to stir them up in a pot and say, thank you, but when you have a strategy, could you please consider the internal market and competitiveness as one of your great tools to act with? So, just to say, before we go further, we have a lot of great companies. These are some of the companies that contributed to this study. And a big thank you to all of them. We have the ability now to basically poll, our membership and also our NTA's membership to know much more what's going on ground. And that is one of our vision for the next Commission, is to provide much more knowledge on what's going on from the business side, to make sure that the next Commission is a facilitation, not a regulation commission, but a facilitation commission that can facilitate the success also of businesses in Europe and of people in Europe, and not least of the decisions of the Council of the Member States.